Um, you guys have probably noticed that different types of corals are different colors. You might have noticed that certain types of corals can have many different colors. But the coral animal itself is actually clear, and the skeleton underneath is a very pure white. So what would be causing them to have these colors? Well, the colors come from the algae, the zooxanthellae, and it's sort of unclear about whether it's different species of zooxanthellae in different species of coral, or whether it's one species of algae that has many different clades, or just basically groups that will inhabit corals in different habitats. One thing you'll see, like with the cauliflower coral, for example, is the shallower ones will often be like pink or orange, where the deeper ones will often be sort of dull brown or white even. They're not white, but maybe more of a tan or gray. And the hypothesis is that, or one hypothesis is that the algae up in those higher, shallower zones have more UV protecting molecules within them, causing them to be a different color. But regardless, all the color that you'll see in a coral comes from the algae in their tissue. Okay, so some other parameters for healthy coral growth. Already I mentioned sunlight, but that has another consequence. So the ocean, the water, absorbs sunlight, absorbs the visible light as you go deeper. So first you lose the reds and the yellows, orange, blues, and so on. So at some point, the amount of light left penetrating the water is not enough for photosynthesis in corals. So most corals inhabit from 0 to about 300 feet. There are corals deeper that have other methods for producing food. Some of them use chemicals in the water, other ones just eat instead of photosynthesizing. And then some corals, very rare, but sometimes you'll find cauliflower corals that are even up so high to the surface that at low tide they're exposed when the waves wash out. Sunlight, depth, clear water, meaning low nutrient water or low sediment. I'll talk about sediment a little later. pH is important because the calcium carbonate that the corals use to grow their skeleton. Have you guys ever done an experiment in a class when you were really little? If you can remember that long ago, no offense. You would take a piece of chalk or limestone or whatever, and you'd put a little drop of hydrochloric acid on it, and it would fizz. So what's happening is the acid is dissolving that material and releasing hydrogen gas, and that's what causes the little bubbles. It's a sort of simple chemical reaction, but complex to describe. I'll try to do my best. But basically, calcium carbonate, the mineral that corals use for their skeleton, is a calcium ion and a carbonate ion. And carbonate is CO3, so it's carbon and 3 oxygens. And the way carbonate gets into the ocean is CO2, carbon dioxide, from the atmosphere, dissolves into the water. A lot of gases equilibrate between the ocean and the atmosphere. When that carbon dioxide gets in the water, it reacts with the water molecules. So H2O plus CO2 comes out to H2CO3. So 2 hydrogens, a carbon, and 3 oxygens. And then because it's in solution in water, it dissolves. And you end up with a hydrogen ion and then HCO3 minus, which is called bicarbonate. And then depending on the pH of the water, it can dissociate farther into 2 hydrogen ions and then a carbonate ion. And then the corals take advantage of that. They manipulate the environment immediately surrounding their skeleton, and they take calcium, which is just one of the salts that's found in the ocean, and they bond it with carbonate using a little bit of energy, and it attaches to their skeleton. But what happens when you have your pH of a healthy ocean should be about 8.3. As the pH drops, becomes more acidic, the amount of hydrogen ions in the water increases. And those hydrogen ions compete with the calcium for that carbonate ion, and it makes it harder for corals to grow their skeleton. It makes it more energetically expensive. It turns out that even if in a slightly basic environment like 7.4, corals and other calcifying organisms like snails and certain types of algae have trouble growing their shells or their skeletons. And lab experiments where they put 3 tanks, one like 8.3, one like 7.9, and one 7.4, it shows that the animals will all grow the skeleton to the same size, but the skeleton in the low pH environment will be very brittle, it will be less dense, so they're basically taking less molecules and filling up more space. And then that means that they'll be less resistant to predation, less resistant to storm damage, less resistant to trampling, waves, whatever. So you really need to have a good, healthy pH, and that's one of the reasons we need to be concerned with carbon dioxide emissions, lowering the pH of our oceans. With salinity, I've never been able to get a straight answer about why this matters, but all I can chalk it up to is freshwater fish can't live in saltwater, and saltwater fish can't live in freshwater. And it all has to do, in that case, it all has to do with how they regulate the salts in their body and excrete waste. And as far as I can tell, that's the only thing that might affect corals in a low salinity environment. But in Hawaii, sometimes salinity has something else associated with it, and that is temperature. So a lot of our low salinity places like Kahului Bay, and I'm not sure about you guys, I haven't been swimming here in a long time, but we have a lot of freshwater springs coming in. Do you guys have that here too? Yeah. Okay, so that water's usually really cold, right? So that can play a part of this next thing. So temperature is one of the things that kind of has a more immediate impact on corals. Have you guys heard of coral bleaching before? Okay, so coral bleaching happens when corals are stressed. And one of the things that stresses them really quickly is temperature that is not within their desired range. So corals as a group can live between generally 70 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, but each species has a smaller range of 1 to 2 degrees Celsius that they prefer. And if the temperature goes above that or below that, they become stressed and can bleach. In most cases, the temperature goes above that, and it's sort of hard to say why, but the corals will expel their algae, leading to the bleaching. So you see what you're seeing, that bleaching effect, is you're looking right through the coral polyps because they're clear and seeing the white skeleton underneath. And I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I just want to say that one of the theories is that the increased temperature causes an increase in the production of the algae, the zooxanthellae, inside the coral tissues, and it can lead to a toxic environment within the coral, so they get rid of the algae in order to prevent any poisoning. So it may even be that oxygen is the poison, because in humans, if you were to breathe pure oxygen at depth, and that oxygen got in your blood in a higher concentration than it should be, that's actually a deadly poison. So that's just one of the mechanisms proposed for why corals bleach. So, okay. Do you guys have any questions so far? Some of those things are sort of complicated to just say and to listen to. Okay so far? Okay.